Hi, everybody. So, in this mini lecture, we are going to be going over biographical literary criticism, talking about when it sort of got started, some of its limitations, and some of the benefits to biographical criticism. So, let's dive right in. As far as origins are concerned, biographical criticism really came around and really dominated during the period where humanism, the focus on the individual human person, really dominated literary studies. So roughly, let's say the 1750s through the 1960s, and the 1960s is really, in a lot of ways, when we sort of started moving away from this very focus on the individual and really started developing a lot of other approaches to literary criticism. Biographical criticism really kind of takes the stance that the literature, the plays, the poems, the fiction is in a lot of ways a direct expression of the author's genius. And criticism of literary texts is a way to raise up and celebrate those authors for their works of genius. Like, the best authors get the most criticism. However, there are a lot of limitations to this, which is in a lot of ways why we don't focus so heavily on the biography of authors, poets, and playwrights. So it's often, biographical criticism is often reductive or diminishing. Writers are neither great nor are they terrible because of who they are or where they came from or their lifestyles. John Keats was not a poor poet because of his socioeconomic status. In fact, we now generally regard him as one of the greatest poets of the Romantic era. Similarly, it can be reductive in the sense that, like, no matter how much we know about a given author's life, that level of detail, that level of knowledge is not going to give us all of the answers that we maybe are looking for. It's not going to give us everything we need to know in order to interpret an author's text. I have here a photo of the author Tim O'Brien, who wrote his most famous work is a piece on the Vietnam War. It's a collection of short stories. Some people call it a novel. Some people call it a pseudo memoir called The Things They Carried. And a lot of folks tend to focus on the sort of the reality of the things they carried, how much of that really happened. And by doing that, I think they're really kind of missing the point here. It also, biographical criticism also places a lot of emphasis on authorial intent. So what was the author trying to do, or what were they trying to achieve? What were they feeling when they wrote this poem or this play or this short story? While that may be important sometimes, authorial intent is not the end all and be all of literary criticism. Once a text is out there in the world, it's ours. It's up for us to criticize and interpret and read and understand, however we choose to do so. That said, there are some benefits to considering an author's biography. It allows us to place texts within various literary traditions. So knowing, for instance, that an author is an African American or an Asian American, or, that they were born in the midst of and writing within, say, the Harlem Renaissance, or responding to the Harlem Renaissance. Like, these are good pieces of knowledge for us to have, because it lets us place their work in the context of other authors like them. We can read Flannery O'Connor as, a unique individual, or we could also read her as a Southern writer. It also, biographical criticism also allows us to draw on a whole subset of ideas and contexts and other things. So it allows us to look at not just this one individual piece that an author has written, but placing that one piece in the context of their body of work. It could look at the circumstances of contemporary publishing. So what was going on in the publishing world at the time that the author was writing. It can help us think about the contemporary literary movements. If there was a move for towards realism, or towards sort of a more fantastical approach. These are things very much worth considering and worth talking about. And lastly, biographical criticism also gives us the ability to take into context the history of composition, how a text was written and edited and published, giving us kind of some background on how did this come into being here. I have here on my on my right, from your perspective, a picture of Junot Diaz, who we're actually going to be reading a little bit later on in the course. Knowing a little something about him as a Dominican American author who grew up, who was born in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic and was raised in New Jersey. Knowing a little something about him, being able to place him into context of other immigrant writers, but also looking at some of the details of his life and how they kind of creep up sometimes in some of his work. Like these are some of the benefits of biographical criticism. So just to keep in mind and to recap, it is good to know these things, and it's a good starting point for us. We should know a little something about the authors, poets, and playwrights that we're reading and writing about, but it can also be very limiting if we only look at a text through the lens of who wrote it. So thanks very much, and I will see you all in the next video.